Do you feel called to lead and equip both in the local church as well as in the marketplace? Are you finding it a little bit challenging to navigate it? I received a question about this, so let's talk about it. Welcome to Kingdom Over Everything. I am your host and Chief Fire Igniter, Shae Bynes. I received this question from Fanny, and the question is, have you found in your experience with growing in kingdom entrepreneurship that you've come across resistance in the church more than in the marketplace? If so, how did you navigate that to ensure purity of heart, especially when you're equipping and visible in both places? Do you see marketplace and church as two separate bodies or the same? How do you navigate it when you're called to equip and be visible in both places? So there's a lot there. And so let's talk through that. Well, first let me say that it's relatively common for someone to have a leadership position within the local church as well as lead and equip others in the marketplace. I do see the local church, I'm not talking about the body of Christ, which is the church, but the local church and the marketplace are definitely two different entities. And I think it's important to know what you're called to and how you're supposed to navigate in both of those places. For example, in your marketplace assignment as a business owner, because you mentioned kingdom entrepreneurship here, if you're a business owner, you have a business, which means you have a product or a service or both that is meeting a need or meeting a desire in the marketplace that people are paying you for that product and that service. There is an exchange there, and that is business. And you will profit in your business financially as well as eternally if you are kingdom driven. In the local church, your equipping of people, most likely, I mean, unless you are a staff person who is paid by the church, you're probably a volunteer and you're probably not paid to do it. And it's not a product or service that anyone is paying you for. There's no customer, right? From that perspective. So you do have to look at them differently, even if how you show up as a leader, because you are you wherever you are. You are going to be authentically you. Even if you're showing up and serving people in both places, you got to have your proper context and you have to also know what your boundaries are, right? So if you're doing the same types of things inside church and outside of church, you're going to have to be really clear about drawing those lines when it comes to working with someone who might be a part of that local church and working with them as a client or a customer in your business. Okay. So definitely need for some clear lines and clear communication from that perspective. But yes, I would say I look at those as two separate things. You mentioned this thing about have I ever come across resistance more in the church? Personally, no, but there are certainly others who would say that they've experienced some resistance in the church, especially if they were a leader within the church and then they're growing as a business person and maybe they bring their business life into church because you're a full person and you're talking about all the things and maybe some people don't like it, right? I mean, I guess it's possible. I've also had situations where people have had resistance who definitely were leaders in the church and then they were also called to business, and over time they had to draw certain boundaries around their leadership responsibilities within the church because they were both called to business and that leadership position. And so in the process of drawing those boundaries and being clear about how you're showing up in this volunteer capacity here and also doing the things that you need to do with your family, with your business, etc. I know there's definitely I've definitely had conversations with people who have experienced resistance in those ways. I think that this whole idea of having purity of heart is definitely important. Knowing why you're there, knowing what you're called to do, who you're called to serve, and to navigate that, with excellence is important. And I also think that I know I've said boundaries a couple of times. I'm going to say it again. I think communication, knowing what the boundaries are, and being able to communicate those, and being able to lovingly confront issues when they come up and communicate through them so that you don't lead to misunderstandings and other things, I think is really important, especially if you're very active, in your local church and also growing in business. And there might be some dynamic shifts that have to happen, right? So I think communication is super, super important. And then the last thing that I will share as well, this is connected. This isn't what this person asked me, but I feel like I need to share this as well. I've also experienced when people will feel guilty. So what they'll do is they're supposed to actually know they've been in a leadership position within their local church for a long time, and God's actually called them out of that position. And because they have a business and God's growing and how they're serving in that capacity, they feel guilt and shame around the idea of leaving the assignment at the local church that they've been serving for years. And I got to tell you, I mean, when God says the season's up for something, I mean, the season really is up for something. It really becomes a grind. It does, and you're not able to bring yourself, your best self to the table in either instance when you're operating way beyond what your capacity is and way beyond what you're called to in a season. And so, the best thing for someone who's in that position to do is to really seek God around what that transition can look like and also communicate that transition. You want to be able to leave a position in as good or better as it was before you got there, right? And so you don't want to be abrupt and all of those things. And so the communication and the timing and that transition, I think, is really important so that you can be honoring to the position, honoring to those that you've been serving within the local church, but also be honoring to God and the assignment that he's giving you in the marketplace, which is just as important as the leadership and equipping position that you served in within your local church. I hope that is helpful to you, and I'll see you next week.